11th 200 BC, the San Pedro Valley, present-day Arizona. The air is arid, smelling of juniper and dust. A young man, barely 18 winters old, presses himself flat against a rocky rim. His knuckles are white as he grips a wooden spear shaft. Below him, in the dry, grassy wash, a sound like grinding stones, a herd of Colombian mammoths. He feels the vibration through the rock. His mentor, a scarred hunter with a wind-carved face, gives no signal. They wait. Their families, hidden 2 miles away, are hungry, and the young man carries a new weapon, a long fluted point of translucent chert. It is a technology that will change everything. This hunter and his small nomadic band were not the first people to see this land, but they were its first masters. We know them as the Clovis people. They emerged from the Ice Age into a continent ruled by giants, 14-foot mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and bears that dwarfed anything they had ever known. Yet within a few centuries, they had claimed an entire continent. Their secret wasn't just courage. It was a revolutionary invention, a deadly fluted spear point that acted like a stone ballistic missile. But who were they? How did they cross a frozen world? And how did they use this technology to become the apex predators of prehistoric America? By the end of this journey, you will understand how the first Americans survived impossible odds, only to vanish as mysteriously as they arrived. Our story begins not with a discovery, but with an impossible journey. Thousands of years before the young man stalked his prey in Arizona, his ancestors were somewhere else entirely. They were in Beringia. This was not a literal ice bridge. You must erase the image of a narrow, slippery pathway. Beringia was a lost continent. During the peak of the Pleistocene Ice Age, global sea levels dropped by hundreds of feet, exposing a vast, arid landmass stretching nearly 1,000 miles between Siberia and Alaska. This was a treeless world, a frozen tundra known as the Mammoth Steppe. It was harsh, locked in perpetual winter twilight and swept by relentless winds. But it was not empty. It was teeming with life. Herds of woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, ancient steppe bison, and prehistoric horses grazed on the dry grasses and sedges. And following them were the predators, fearsome cave lions and small, resilient groups of humans. For thousands of years, these first Paleo-Indians lived in Beringia. It was not a migration, it was a standstill. Their DNA tells a story of genetic isolation, a population trapped between 2 worlds, tempered by the extreme cold. They became masters of Ice Age survival. They sewed fitted clothing from hides using bone needles and sinew. They burned animal bones and dried dung for fuel where there was no wood. They studied the giants, learning their rhythms, their weaknesses, and their migrations. They knew nothing of a new world. They knew only the Mammoth Steppe. Then, around 16,000 years ago, the world began to change. The colossal glaciers covering North America, the Laurentide ice sheet in the east, and the Cordilleran in the west, began to melt. This did 2 things. It slowly drowned their Beringian homeland under the rising sea, and it opened a path. Archaeologists have long debated this route. For decades, the dominant theory was an ice-free corridor that opened between the 2 giant ice sheets, allowing humans to walk south into the heart of the continent. But this corridor would have been a dreadful place, a desolate, 1,000-mile-long wind tunnel with little food or shelter. It is more likely the first journey was even more perilous. Recent evidence points to a coastal kelp highway. As the coastal glaciers retreated, they exposed a chain of islands and resource-rich coastlines. These first people, perhaps already adapted to exploiting marine resources, traveled down the Pacific edge in simple boats made of animal hide. Imagine it. Small families paddling through near-freezing water with a 2-mile-high wall of ice looming on their left and the vast Pacific on their right. They hunted seals, caught fish, and gathered edible kelp, moving from bay to bay. It was one of the greatest maritime explorations in human history, and it left no trace but their genes and shattered pieces of stone. Whether they came by land or by sea, when they passed that icy veil, they stepped into a world that had never known a human footstep. The silence was the first shock. Not the silence of wind over ice, but a living silence, thick with the sounds of unfamiliar birds and the rustle of creatures in the deep, untrodden leaf litter. The air itself felt different, heavier, humid, rich with the scent of damp earth, sprawling forests of spruce and fir, and the musk of animals they had never smelled before. This was not the sparse, wind-swept steppe. This was a garden, overflowing with life. Vast wetlands teemed with waterfowl. Rivers ran silver with spawning salmon, so thick they could be speared from the bank. But this garden was ruled by titans. Their first encounters must have been terrifying. They were masters of hunting 10-foot-tall woolly mammoths, but they were unprepared for the 14-foot-tall Colombian mammoth, a creature of a more temperate world, moving in vast, earth-shaking herds. They knew the steppe lion, but not Smilodon fatalis, the saber-toothed cat, a 700-pound ambush predator with 9-inch daggers protruding from its jaws. And then there was the bear. In their old world, the greatest bear was a formidable foe. Here they met Arctodus simus, the giant short-faced bear. Standing 12 feet tall on its hind legs, it was a long-legged predator built for pursuit, capable of running down the prehistoric horses that grazed the parklands. It was a monster that had no fear, because in this entire continent nothing had ever challenged it. And the animals had no fear. This is a crucial detail, easy to miss. For millions of years, the largest creatures of North America had evolved without a two-legged, tool-wielding predator. Humans were not part of the equation. A small group of hunters would have been seen not as a threat, but as an irrelevant curiosity, or worse, as an easy meal. Their old ways of hunting were suddenly inadequate. The small microblade-based tools that worked on Beringian reindeer were like pebbles against the hide of a mastodon, a forest-dwelling browser that ripped apart entire trees. Their survival depended on adaptation, and it had to be rapid. For the first few generations, perhaps the first few centuries, they were not the apex predators. They were scavengers, opportunists, and often prey. They would have skirted the great herds, watching. They learned to kill smaller game, the giant beaver, castoroids, that built dams the size of small houses, the strange tapir-like Hemiorchenia, or the giant tortoises that provided an easy armored meal. They learned the new plants, testing them by bitter trial and error. Archaeologists find hints of these early, pre-Clovis people at sites like Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania or the Paisley Caves in Oregon, where fossilized human DNA proves people were here before the ice-free corridor had even fully opened. These first explorers were versatile and brilliant. They carried toolkits of bone needles, scrapers for hides, and simple, leaf-shaped spear points called bifaces. They moved in small, extended family groups, following the rivers, learning the rhythms of this new land. They were survivors, but they were not yet conquerors. The defining challenge of this new world was the sheer scale of the protein walking on 4 legs, the megafauna. To hunt one of these beasts with a simple hand-thrust spear was not a hunt. It was a suicide pact. The hunter would have to get impossibly close, risking a fatal stomp, gore, or swipe from a trunk. They needed a force multiplier. They needed a weapon that could be delivered from a safer distance, with enough penetrating power to punch through a hide as thick as rubber-bound plywood and hit a vital organ. They needed a technology that could kill a giant before the giant killed them. Somewhere, in a small encampment, perhaps during a long, cold winter, a master flint napper looked at a piece of high-quality stone, flint, chert, or obsidian. He or she was not just trying to make another point. They were trying to solve an engineering problem. They were about to invent a masterpiece. The process is called flint napping, but that word is too simple. It fails to capture the genius. This is applied physics, mastered through thousands of hours of tactile experience. You do not simply hit the stone, you read it. The napper, we will call him man who listens to stone, selects a nodule of high-grade chert from a riverbed, perhaps from a quarry hundreds of miles away, carried in a hide bag. He knows its internal structure, its flaws, its potential. His first tool is a hammerstone, heavy and blunt, used for percussion. With sharp, controlled blows, he strikes the edge, shearing off large flakes. This is the rough shaping, the bifacial thinning, turning a round cobble into a flat, leaf-shaped preform. Each strike is a calculation of angle and force, the sound a sharp crack ringing through the camp. But the real magic comes next. He puts away the hammerstone and picks up a tine of antler or a piece of dense bone. This is pressure flaking. He braces the stone preform against his leg, protected by a leather pad, and leans into the antler tip, applying immense, focused pressure to the edge. Instead of a crack, there is a sharp pop. A tiny, razor-sharp flake flies off. He does this again and again, with the precision of a surgeon, creating an edge so sharp it is, on a microscopic level, more acute than a steel scalpel. Now the final revolutionary step, the one that defines his people. He turns the point base up, supports it on a special anvil, and with a single, perfectly executed strike, he removes one long, wide flake, running from the base up the center of the point. He turns it over and does it again. This is the flute. It's a deliberate, counterintuitive act. He has just weakened the base of his point. Why? Because this flute is not for bloodletting, as was once thought. It is an engineering marvel. The channel creates a thin, concave socket. When this point is inserted into the split end of a wooden shaft, it sinks deeper and fits more snugly than any point before it. When bound with wet sinew, which shrinks and hardens like epoxy, the point and shaft become one seamless aerodynamic unit. There is no wobble, no wasted energy. On impact, it will not snap off the shaft. It will drive through. But this point is only half of the weapons system. The other half is the atlat. A simple spear, thrown by even the strongest hunter, has limited range and power. The atlatl changes the equation. It is a piece of wood, perhaps 2 feet long, with a handle at one end and a small carved hook at the other. The base of the spear shaft, now called a dart, clicks onto this hook. This device is a simple lever. It functionally extends the hunter's arm by 2 feet. As the hunter swings their arm forward in a throwing motion, the atlatl acts as a spring, multiplying the leverage and the velocity. The dart doesn't just fly. It is launched, flexing violently before straightening in mid-air, traveling at speeds over 80 miles per hour. This is the Clovis combination, the fluted point, designed for maximum, streamlined penetration, delivered by the atlatl, a high-velocity launch system. It is the first projectile weapons system in the Americas capable of bringing down a 10-ton mammoth. This technology spreads across the continent with astonishing speed. We find these identical points, from the coasts of California to the swamps of Florida, from southern Canada to northern Mexico. They are the defining fossil of a new, hyper-successful culture. They are the signature of the Clovis people. The tool is made. The technique is perfected. Now the sun is low, and the trackers have spotted movement by the river. The air, once filled with the pop of pressure flaking, grows quiet. It is time to hunt. This is not a battle of strength. It is a battle of geometry and patience. The hunting party moves low and fast, using the contours of a dry riverbed, an arroyo, to mask their approach. There are perhaps 5 of them, led by the scarred mentor from Arizona, the man who has done this before. The target is a herd of 8 Colombian mammoths, clustered around a shrinking spring. The wind is in their favor, carrying their scent away from the giants. The hunters do not look at the massive bull, the 14-foot-tall patriarch with tusks that curve like polished driftwood. He is untouchable. They look instead for weakness. A young male, lagging behind. A mother, slowed by a calf. Or there, an older female, favoring her left foreleg. A slight, almost imperceptible limp. She is the one. The mentor gives a silent hand signal. The group splits. 2 hunters circle wide to the east, their job not to attack, but to appear suddenly, to use noise and movement to separate the limping female from the herd's protection. The other 3, including the young man with the new point, grip their atlatls. The mentor raises his hand. He waits, until the female is a few yards isolated, browsing on a clump of salt bush. He drops his hand. The 2 drivers burst from cover, yelling, waving their spears. The herd trumpets in alarm. The giants turn, confused, bunching together. The old female panics, confused by the noise from the east, and turns west toward the arroyo, just as planned. "Now!" The mentor's voice is a low grunt. The 3 hunters rise from the ditch. They are not 20 yards away. For a terrifying second, the mammoth sees them. Her eyes widen, her trunk rises to trumpet a warning, but it is too late. There is no elegant thwip of a bowstring. There is a deep, visceral whoosh thwack as the hunters snap their arms forward. The atlatls catapult the 6-foot darts with devastating force. The young man watches his own spear, the one he spent days crafting, fly true. 2 of the darts strike home. One thuds into the thick-muscled shoulder, a non-lethal, infuriating wound. But the young man's point, the translucent chert, hits perfectly, just behind the rib cage, angled forward and up. It punches through the 2-inch thick hide, slides between ribs, and buries itself deep inside the creature's core. The mammoth screams. It is a sound of terror and agony that shakes the ground. It charges not at the hunters, who are already scrambling back into the arroyo, but in a blind panic. The herd, now in a full stampede, thunders away to the north, leaving the wounded female behind. The hunt is not over. It has just begun. This is not a quick kill. The hunters do not close in. The fluted point has done its job. It has delivered a massive internal hemorrhage. Now they wait. They follow at a safe distance as the sun sets, painting the sky in shades of blood and ochre. The mammoth slows. Its charge becomes a walk, its walk a stagger. It stands by a cluster of cottonwood trees, trunk drooping, shuddering. The hunters make a cold camp, listening to the labored breathing of the dying giant in the darkness. When the first light of dawn touches the plain, she is down, lying on her side. The earth is dark and wet around her. The young hunter approaches first, his stone knife ready. He touches the vast, leathery hide. The eye is open, still. The mentor places a hand on his shoulder. There is no celebration, only a quiet, profound relief. This one animal is a mountain of resources. It is 10,000 pounds of meat to be smoked and dried. It is a hide that will cover 3 shelters. Its tusks will be used as supports, its bones as anvils, tools, and fuel. This one kill, made possible by a piece of fluted stone, means the entire band will survive the coming winter. This success, this mastery, is what will allow them to spread. This hunt, and others like it, is why, in just a few hundred years, the Clovis people will be everywhere. The kill site becomes the center of their world. For a week, perhaps 2, the band anchors here, under a sky vast and empty of rivals. This is not a home. It is a processing plant, humming with communal activity. While the hunters rest, guard the meat from dire wolves, or scout for the next water source, the rest of the band, women, elders, and children, descends on the carcass. This is a display of incredible knowledge and efficiency. Stone knives, resharpened with deft pressure flaking, flash in the sun. They work with a practiced, systematic rhythm. The hide, thick as a truck tire, is peeled back in massive sheets to be scraped clean with heavy stone end scrapers. This hide is life. It will become the tailored, fur-lined clothing seen in their Ice Age ancestors, sewn with delicate bone needles. It will form the lightweight, conical shelters, the teepees that can be collapsed and moved in a matter of hours. The meat is sliced into thin strips and hung on wooden racks to dry in the arid wind, creating jerky, a lightweight, high-energy preserved food that fuels their nomadic life. Tendons are pulled, processed, and twisted into sinew, the superglue and thread of the Pleistocene. Even the bones are shattered with heavy choppers to extract the rich, calorie-dense marrow, a vital food source. Nothing is wasted. We call them big game hunters, and they were. But archaeology at sites like Galt in Texas paints a more complex picture. They were supremely successful generalists. When the mammoths moved on, they hunted the ancient straight-horned bison, Bison antiquus. They hunted prehistoric horses, camels, camelops, and giant sloths. They trapped rabbits, turtles, and waterfowl. They were masters of their entire environment. This adaptability, powered by their toolkit, is what creates the Clovis horizon. In archaeological time, it is an explosion. From 11 to 500 BC to roughly 10,800 BC, a span of just 700 years, perhaps 30 generations, these fluted points appear everywhere. From the frozen riverbeds of Alaska to the humid springs of Florida, from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic, the continent is settled. This wasn't an organized migration. It was a wave of advance. Imagine a family group of 25 people. Their technology is so effective that food is abundant. Their population grows. When the group reaches 50, resources get tight. A daughter, her partner, and their new children, along with a few other families, simply break off. They walk over the next ridge, into a valley no human has ever seen, a valley filled with game that has never seen a human. They are explorers, mapping a continent in real time. They discover the best stone quarries, the colorful chert of the Texas Panhandle, the volcanic glass of obsidian in the Rockies. They are so attuned to their stone that a point found in New Mexico might be made from material quarried 500 miles away in North Dakota, carried by a single hunter on his seasonal round. And they have a rich inner life. At the Anzick site in Montana, the only known Clovis burial, a young child, not yet 2 years old, was interred. With the child were placed over 100 tools, massive bifaces, atlatl parts, and finished Clovis points. The entire offering was then dusted with sacred red ochre, a pigment symbolizing blood and life. This was not the act of simple survivalists. This was a culture of deep ritual, complex belief, and love. They had done it. They had survived the Ice Age, crossed a lost continent, mastered a new world, and engineered a technology to conquer its giants. They stood at the absolute peak of their power, the undisputed human rulers of prehistoric America. But this world of giants, and the people who hunted them, was about to face a catastrophe. A shadow was falling, and a new, colder silence was about to descend on the plains. Around 10,900 BC, the world broke. The planet had been warming for millennia, the great ice sheets in retreat. The Clovis people were adapting to this warmer, wetter world. Then, in the span of a single human lifetime, perhaps in as little as a decade, the climate snapped back with terrifying violence. This event is known as the Younger Dryas. It was a return to the Ice Age. Temperatures across North America plummeted, dropping by as much as 27 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Celsius. The meltwater pulse that had been flowing into the oceans suddenly stalled. The garden of the New World failed. The effect was catastrophic. The sprawling spruce forests of the east died off, replaced by cold, tolerant tundra. The great grasslands of the plains shriveled, turning arid and dusty. Lakes dried up, and rivers shrank. For the megafauna, this was an extinction-level event. The giants, the mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, and prehistoric horses, were animals built for the stable, predictable climate of the Pleistocene. They were large, had slow reproductive cycles, and required immense amounts of food. When their environment changed this fast, they could not adapt. The mammoths that relied on vast grasslands found only dust. The The mastodons that browsed on spruce found only tundra. This climate shock was one half of a pincer movement. The other half was the humans. For centuries, the highly efficient Clovis hunters had been predating these populations. The giants were resilient, but they had never faced a predator this intelligent. Now, with their habitats collapsing and their food sources vanishing, the pressure from human spears became unbearable. The overkill and overchill hypotheses converged. Herds thinned. The last mammoths made their final stand in isolated pockets, perhaps at a final, muddy waterhole where hunters would have found them weak and easy prey. The great smilodon and the dire wolves starved as their own prey disappeared. The short-faced bear, the monster that once ruled the continent, vanished forever. Within a few hundred years, 35 different genera, entire categories, of large animals were wiped off the face of North America. The plains fell silent. The age of giants was over. And the Clovis people? Their entire culture was built on this megafauna. Their tools, their hunting strategies, their very way of life was interwoven with the mammoth. And just as suddenly as the animals, the Clovis point itself vanishes from the archaeological record. It is one of the most profound mysteries in prehistory. What happened to them? Did they die out? Some theories are dramatic. A controversial hypothesis suggests this entire cataclysm was triggered by the airburst of a comet fragmenting over the North American ice sheet, igniting continent-spanning wildfires and triggering the Younger Dryas. Proponents point to a black mat layer found at many Clovis sites, a layer rich in charcoal, iridium, and nanodiamonds, the supposed fingerprints of an extraterrestrial impact. Or did they simply change? The Clovis people were, above all, survivors. They had crossed ice sheets and tamed a continent. It is unlikely they simply gave up. The more likely answer is that they adapted. As the giants disappeared, the hunt changed. It was no longer about killing one 10-ton mammoth. It was about killing 20 fast-moving bison or 100 rabbits. Their technology had to change, too. The heavy-duty Clovis point, a masterpiece for killing elephants, was over-engineered and wasteful for hunting deer. The descendants of the Clovis people laid down their fluted points. They picked up new stones. They began making smaller, finer, more varied points, like the Folsom point, a masterpiece of thinness designed specifically to hunt the now dominant bison antiquus. The Clovis people didn't vanish. Their way of life did. They became the ancestors of all the myriad cultures that would follow. They were the foundation. But their world, the Pleistocene world of ice and mammoths and fluted spears, was gone. Their 700-year reign was over, leaving behind only their beautiful, lethal stone calling cards, buried in the same soil as the monsters they hunted. The story of the Clovis people is a powerful, humbling reminder of human resilience and fragility. They were the true pioneers of America, masters of a world we can barely imagine. Their extinction, or their transformation, is a profound lesson in how quickly a world can change. What part of the Clovis survival story do you find most incredible? Their journey across the ice, their mastery of flint knapping, or their ability to hunt 10-ton giants? If you found this journey into our deepest past as fascinating as we do, please share this video with someone who loves history, and subscribe for more hidden stories from the dawn of humanity.